Let me tell you something that could change your life forever. If you try to hold everything together on your own, you are already carrying a weight you were never created to bear. Life will crush you when you try to play God instead of trusting God. You will drown in stress, fear, regret, and confusion when you think your strength is enough. But there's a moment, right here, right now, when you must make the most important decision of your life. Let God take over your situation. You have cried enough tears behind closed doors. You have wrestled with thoughts that torment you in the silence of the night. You've tried everything, logic, strategy, even desperation, but nothing changes. Doors remain closed. Peace stays far away. People fail you, time runs out, but God does not fail. When you release your grip and surrender the situation into the mighty hands of God, you don't lose control, you gain divine intervention. You gain the power of the one who sees what you cannot see, who knows what you cannot know, and who can do what no human effort can ever accomplish. But when God takes over, chaos must bow. When God takes over, storms that threaten to destroy you are suddenly still. The very same waves that try to drown you become the foundation you walk on. God does not need your ability. He requires your surrender. He does not ask you to be strong. He asks you to be still and know that He is God. There is a moment when God waits for your permission to intervene, not because He lacks the power to act, but because He respects the will He gave you. And when you choose to let go and let God take over, everything changes. God is not interested in half-surrendered hearts. He's not moved by words that are empty of trust. He responds to the soul that kneels before Him and says, I can't, but you can. I don't know, but you do. I'm lost, but you are the way. And when you say that, not just with your mouth, but with every fiber of your being, God steps into your fire, not to take you around it, but to walk with you through it until the flames can no longer touch you. Some of you are standing on the edge of a breakthrough, but you're too busy trying to fix the situation yourself. You're still texting the people who left you, still chasing the doors God already closed, still trusting the job more than you trust the provider. But the voice of God is calling out to you today, give it to me. I will do more in one moment than you could do in a lifetime. God doesn't need more of your effort. He needs more of your trust. Stop negotiating with fear and start declaring your faith. Stop analyzing the problem and start magnifying your God. If the burden has become unbearable, it's because it was never meant to be carried by you alone. You've been walking in your own wisdom, but now it's time to fall on your knees and cry out, God, take over this situation. Take over my pain. Take over my decisions. Take over my life. Let me tell you something bold and true. What you see as a crisis, God sees as a construction site. He is building something eternal in the middle of your pain. Every delay is God's divine redirection. Every no is a yes to something higher. Every heartbreak is a holy breaking that leads to your breakthrough. But this cannot happen until you stop trying to be the hero of your own story and let God be God over your situation. You cannot hear God clearly when your mind is full of panic. You cannot see God's way when you're blinded by your own plans. There must come a moment when you lay it all down and say, even if I lose everything, as long as I have God, I have more than enough. That kind of surrender shakes the gates of hell. That kind of surrender moves the heart of God. It doesn't matter how far you've fallen, how long you've waited, or how impossible it seems. If God can part the sea, He can part the situation that's blocking your destiny. If God can bring water from a rock, He can bring a miracle out of your mess. If God can raise the sun every morning, He can raise your hope from the dead. The question is not, can God? The question is, will you let Him? Some of you are facing things right now that are bigger than your understanding. The doctor gave you a report that shook your spirit. Your family is falling apart. Your finances are in a free fall. The people you trusted turned their backs. And in the middle of it, the voice of doubt screams, "Where is God?" But let me tell you, God never left. He's waiting for you to drop your pride, waiting for you to stop trying to be strong, waiting for you to say, "God, I trust you more than I trust what I see." God does not need your timeline. He does not move according to your calendar. He does not obey the rules of this world. When God takes over, time bends to His will. Natural laws bow to His command. What was delayed is suddenly accelerated. What was dead is suddenly alive. What was broken is suddenly whole. But you must make room for Him. You must clear out the fear, the control, the doubt, the resentment, and let God move. Let God be the voice that leads your next step. Let God be the peace that anchors your soul. Let God be the strength in your weakness, the wisdom in your confusion, the calm in your storm. Let God take over your situation, and you will discover a level of freedom, power, and victory that no human hand can provide. And you may not understand the path you're walking, but God never asked you to understand. He asked you to trust. You may not feel strong enough to face what's ahead, but God never asked you to be strong. He asked you to rest in His strength. You may not know the answer, but God is not asking you to solve it. He is asking you to believe that He already has. When God takes over your situation, He doesn't just fix the surface, He transforms the root. He doesn't just remove the storm, He teaches you to sleep through it. He doesn't just take away the pain, He turns it into purpose. But the key is surrender. Not partial surrender, not temporary surrender. If you've tried everything else and nothing worked, maybe that's because God was never meant to be your last resort. He was meant to be your first response. If you're tired, that's a sign that it's time to let go. If you're anxious, it's because you're trying to control what only God can carry. If you're confused, it's because your eyes are on the problem instead of the promise keeper. God is calling you deeper, beyond the shallow waters of human solutions, beyond the quick fix answers, beyond the temporary distractions, into the deep waters of faith where you lose sight of the shore and trust that God will carry you, into the place where peace makes no sense and joy defies circumstances, into the place where miracles become your testimony, because you had the courage to let go. Right now, this very moment, speak to your situation. Declare that it is no longer in your hands. It is in the hands of the one who holds the universe. Say to your fear, "You are no longer my master." Say to your past, "You are no longer my prison." Say to your burden, "You are no longer my identity." Let God take over and watch how your midnight turns to morning, how your pain becomes praise, how your waiting becomes a witness to the faithfulness of God. Don't let another day go by trying to do what only God can do. Don't let another night steal your peace when the Prince of Peace is offering to carry your storm. You were not created to carry anxiety, fear, shame, or regret. You were created to trust God, to walk with God, to be carried by God. Let God take over, and you will finally breathe the air of true freedom, not the kind of freedom the world promises through wealth or power, but the kind of freedom that sets your soul at rest. You see, there is a heavy burden that comes from self-dependence. There is a silent torment in trying to control what was never yours to control. But when you step aside and invite God to take the wheel, you shift from struggling to surrender, from panic to peace, from pressure to purpose. The most powerful moment in your life will not be when you achieve your dreams, but when you realize that God's plan is far greater than anything you ever dared to imagine. You've been standing at the edge for too long, asking questions that echo with no answers. Why isn't it working? Why is nothing changing? Why does it feel like I'm walking in circles? But maybe the answer is not found in another strategy. Maybe the answer is in a sacred silence that says, God, I give it all to you. When God takes over, confusion turns into clarity. The fog lifts. The pieces that once didn't make sense begin to form a pattern, and you realize that all along, God was writing a masterpiece, you just couldn't see it because your hands were covering the canvas. Some of you have mistaken motion for progress. You've been busy making calls, sending messages, moving from one place to another, yet you remain stuck. Because human effort without divine guidance is like rowing a boat against the wind. You're exhausting yourself but going nowhere. But when God steps in, He speaks to the winds and they obey. He calms the sea without a struggle. The same circumstances remain, but the power behind them shifts. And you will know without a doubt that this is not your doing. This is the hand of God moving in power. Let God take over your emotions, and you will find that peace is not a destination, it's a presence. You've tried to suppress the pain, to hide the tears, to pretend you're fine. But God doesn't ask you to be perfect, He asks you to be honest. When you bring your brokenness before Him, you don't meet condemnation, you meet compassion. And that compassion is not weakness, it is the purest strength. God knows what you carry. He sees the silent battles, the hidden fears, the things you've never told anyone, and still He waits not to judge you, but to heal you. But healing can only begin when you release the grip you have on your suffering and hand it over to the only one who can restore your soul. You've been living under pressure to perform, to prove yourself, to be strong when you're falling apart. But God never called you to be impressive. He called you to be obedient. Let God take over your ambition. Let Him redirect your steps, reshape your desires, and refine your motives. Because not everything that glitters is divine. Not every opportunity is a blessing. Sometimes the very thing you're chasing is the distraction that's keeping you from your destiny. But when you let God lead, He will close the wrong doors no matter how beautiful they look. He will shut the trap even if it comes wrapped in charm. And He will always steer you away from destruction, even if it means disappointing your expectations. God is not a backup plan. He is the architect of all things. The world may call it a coincidence, but when you walk with God, you know it's His orchestration. Every delay has divine intention. Every detour holds a lesson. Every closed door is a redirection to something higher. So stop asking, why is this happening? And start declaring, God is in control. That one declaration will change the atmosphere around you. It will shift your posture from defeat to confidence, not in yourself, but in the power of God to complete what He started in you. When you let God take over, you stop reacting and start responding. You stop living in emotional chaos and start moving in spiritual rhythm. God doesn't rush. He establishes. He doesn't panic. He plans. And when He steps into your situation, things begin to align without force. People begin to shift. Not because you manipulated them, but because God moved them. Resources find you. Help arrives on time. Answers come not from your begging, but from your believing. You must come to a place where you can say, even if I don't understand it now, I trust that God is working something far greater than what I can see. That kind of faith unlocks doors that logic can't open. That kind of surrender invites miracles into mundane places. God doesn't need a stage to perform wonders. He often does His greatest work in the quiet, in the unnoticed corners of your life, where no one else is watching, just you and Him. There is a sacred power in surrender. The world tells you to fight harder, to push through, to never let go. But God tells you, let go so I can step in. There is no shame in surrendering to God. There is strength, there is boldness, there is wisdom in knowing that the one who made the stars is more qualified to direct your path than any voice of fear or reason. And when you let God take over, you don't become weak, you become unstoppable. Because it's no longer your limited mind guiding the way, it's the limitless wisdom of God leading you. You may have made mistakes, you may have taken wrong turns, but God's mercy is not limited by your failures. His plan doesn't crumble because of your detours. In fact, sometimes it's your lowest point that becomes your launch point if you place it in God's hands. Don't let guilt keep you from the greatness God still has in store for you. Don't let the past dictate your permission to receive His power. The situation may be messy, but in God's hands, mess becomes meaning. This is not about religion. This is not about rituals. This is about a real, raw, relentless relationship between a soul that is ready to surrender and a God who is always ready to respond. Let God take over your relationships. Stop begging people to stay who were never assigned to your destiny. Stop trusting the opinions of those who don't carry the vision God gave you. When God takes over your relationships, He removes the counterfeit and brings the covenant. He cuts away the distractions and plants divine connections. Let God take over your thoughts. The mind is a battlefield, and many are losing the war in silence. Anxiety is not your identity. Fear is not your future. Doubt is not your destiny. When you invite God into your thoughts, He replaces lies with truth, panic with purpose, and confusion with clarity. You will walk into situations that used to intimidate you and speak with a boldness that didn't come from self-confidence. It came from divine conviction. When God takes over, He does not just rearrange what's around you, He transforms what's within you. You begin to think differently, speak differently, walk differently, live differently. You stop trying to earn favor and start living from the favor you already have. You stop striving for validation and start walking in the power of divine approval. That kind of transformation only comes from complete surrender. So take your hands off the wheel. Put your plans, your fears, your future, your pain, put it all before God and say, this belongs to you now. And when you do, watch how peace replaces pressure, how faith replaces fear, how breakthroughs replace breakdowns. It doesn't matter how dark it looks. God specializes in impossible situations. The deeper the pit, the greater the glory when He lifts you out. This is the moment to stop pretending you have it all together. This is the moment to stop acting like you're not afraid. Be honest. Be raw. Be real. God can handle your questions, your anger, your silence, your tears, but what He's waiting for is your surrender. Not because He needs your permission to be God, but because He desires your trust so He can show you who He truly is. Let God take over. Not just a piece of your life, all of it. Not just the pain, but also the pride. Not just the struggle, but also the success. Not just the tears, but also the triumph. Because when God takes over fully, completely, absolutely, then, and only then, will you walk in the fullness of everything He created you to be. Let God take over. Because no matter how strong you think you are, there will come a point when human strength collapses under spiritual pressure. There will come a day when intellect won't be enough, when experience fails you, when resources run out, and when every plan you design begins to fall apart in your hands. And it is in that sacred breaking point that you will finally hear the whisper that has been calling you all along, let me in, let me take over. Not because God desires control, but because He knows how dangerous it is when your destiny is driven by fear instead of faith. Too often, people wait until the pain is unbearable to call upon God. They wait until the storm has nearly destroyed the ship before crying out for rescue. But the wise know God is not the last resort. He is the first foundation. When you build on your own knowledge, the winds will test you. When you build on your own desires, disappointment will shake you. But when you build on the power and wisdom of God, no storm can bring you down. The foundation holds not because of your efforts, but because of God's eternal strength. Surrender is not weakness, it is wisdom. It takes strength to recognize that the weight of your world is safer in the hands of the one who created it. Let God take over the questions that keep you awake at night, the what ifs, the why nots, the when will it happen. You were not created to be tormented by timelines or paralyzed by uncertainty. You were created to walk in trust. And trust doesn't demand explanations. It rests in assurance. When God speaks peace into your heart, that peace will defy every piece of evidence against it. There's a difference between surviving and living. Some are merely existing, counting days, dragging their feet, breathing but not alive. But when God takes over, the breath in your lungs becomes purpose in your bones. You don't just wake up, you rise up. You don't just face another day, you walk into it with divine confidence, knowing that wherever you go, God goes before you. That is the life of a person who has given full authority to, no matter what comes, they remain unshaken. Not because of arrogance, but because of alignment. And when God takes over your perspective, even pain looks different. You stop asking, why am I going through this, and start declaring, God is doing something in this. The fire no longer feels like punishment, it feels like preparation. The waiting no longer feels like denial, it feels like development. You stop cursing the silence and start honoring it, because you know God often works the most when he seems the quietest. That is the maturity of surrender, when your faith is not shaken by what you see, but strengthened by who you know God to be. Let God take over your words. Words have the power to build or destroy, and too many lives are trapped under the weight of careless speech. But when God takes control of your tongue, your mouth no longer speaks doubt, it declares destiny. Your voice no longer echoes fear, it proclaims freedom. When your words align with God's will, mountains move and strongholds break, not because of your power, but because you gave God the space to speak through you. Let God take over your decisions. Every day you are faced with choices that will shape your future, but not every open door is a divine one. Not every opportunity is a calling, and not every invitation is from God. It takes discernment to know when to step and when to stay still. But when God governs your choices, he will lead you away from what looks good and guide you toward what is truly good. You'll find yourself turning down the easy route because you've learned to wait for the ordained path. And though the road may be narrow and steep, you will walk it with unwavering assurance because God is the one directing your steps. God doesn't just want to rescue you, he wants to rewire you. He wants to strip away every dependency that's draining your spirit and rebuild your foundation on trust that cannot be moved. You will never rise above the limits of your trust in God. The deeper your surrender, the higher your potential. The more you decrease in self-dependence, the more God increases in authority over your life. And when God reigns, nothing stays the same. The ordinary becomes supernatural. The broken becomes blessed. The closed becomes open. Some of you are in a spiritual wilderness. You feel like everything around you is dry, silent, and lifeless. But wilderness is not abandonment. It is alignment. God allows the wilderness to remove every false support so that you may know who your true source is. The silence isn't proof of absence. It's the preparation for an outpouring. And when you surrender your situation in the wilderness, God will cause rivers to burst forth in the desert. He will make the barren fruitful. He will speak life into places you gave up on. Let God take over your past. The enemy loves to chain you to what happened, to your mistakes, to your regrets, to your shame. But when God takes over, the chains shatter. He will not rewrite the past, but He will redeem it. He will use every wrong turn to direct you toward your calling. What once looked like failure becomes the soil of your testimony. The same place where you once cried becomes the place where others come to be comforted through you. That is what happens when God takes over. Not just your situation, but your story. Let God take over your identity. You are not what they said about you. You are not the labels, the accusations, or the limitations spoken over your life. You are who God declares you to be. And until you surrender the lies you've believed about yourself, you cannot step into the truth God has spoken over you. You are not a mistake. You are not forgotten. You are not abandoned. You are not defeated. You are chosen, strengthened, and sustained by God, through God, for God. And when God takes over, He doesn't just change what happens to you, He changes how you carry it. You walk through fire and don't smell like smoke. You endure loss and still overflow with gratitude. You face pressure and still pour out peace. That is the evidence of surrender. Not that your life is easy, but that your life is empowered. Not that the storms stop, but that they no longer stop you. Let God take over the timing. Stop trying to rush what only grows in stillness. Stop trying to control what only God can cultivate. There is a time to sow and a time to reap, but both require trust. When God holds the clock, you stop watching minutes and start watching miracles. You stop obsessing over deadlines and start walking in divine timing, knowing that what is meant for you will arrive when you're ready, not when you're anxious. This is the invitation, not to live a life without trouble, but to live a life where trouble cannot steal your trust. Not to avoid the fire, but to walk through it with a faith that cannot be shaken. Let God take over your situation, not just in theory, not just in language, but in reality. Surrender with your actions, with your habits, with your mindset, with your decisions. Let your life declare, I trust God more than I trust my own understanding. And when you do, when that surrender is real, everything changes. Not all at once, not always visibly, but deep within, a shift takes place. And what once terrified you now trains you. What once discouraged you now deepens you. And what once looked like the end becomes the very beginning of everything God had planned all along. Let God take over. Not someday, now. Not partly, completely. Not in words only, but with your whole life. Let God take over your expectations. So many people live disappointed, not because God failed them, but because they built expectations around their own timing, their own desires, and their own limited understanding. But the truth is, your expectations must bow to God's revelation. You may have wanted it to happen last year. You may have imagined it looking a certain way, but God is not confined to your plans. He exceeds them. He goes beyond what you asked for, above what you thought possible, and delivers not just what is good, but what is right. When you let God take over, you don't just wait, you wait with assurance, because you know what is coming is designed by the one who cannot fail. Let God take over your silence. You may feel like you've cried out and heard nothing in return, like your prayers have hit the ceiling and fallen back in pieces. But God does not ignore the cry of the sincere heart. Silence is not absence. It is the sacred space where God teaches you to depend not on signs, but on stillness. In that quiet, God is planting strength you didn't even know you needed. He is preparing you for what you cannot yet handle. You think you're waiting on Him, but in truth, He's preparing the blessing to meet you in maturity. Let God use the silence to sharpen your hearing. Let Him use the delay to deepen your roots. Let God take over the way you respond to adversity. There is a temptation to strike back when wrong, to defend yourself when misunderstood, to control the outcome when things seem unfair. But when you truly let God take over, you no longer act out of emotion, You respond from a place of divine restraint. You begin to understand that God will vindicate, God will reveal, God will lift up what others tried to tear down. And in time, those who doubted you will have no choice but to witness the undeniable evidence of God's hand over your life. You won't have to speak a word. God's work will do the talking. Let God take over your definition of success. The world teaches you that success is measured by numbers, fame, recognition, and wealth. But when God defines your success, He uses a different scale. In the eyes of the world, you may look like a nobody, but in the eyes of God, your obedience makes you unstoppable. When God takes over, the applause of people no longer feeds your identity. You no longer hustle for validation because your worth is no longer up for debate. You walk into rooms without fear, not because you are trying to impress anyone, but because you are already approved by the one who sent you. Yes, see? You know? Yes, see? Let God take over your battles. Stop fighting wars in your own strength. Stop responding to every insult, every betrayal, every attack. Some battles are not yours to fight. They are God's. He is your defender. He sees what you cannot, hears what you do not, and strikes when you least expect it. When you step back and let God take the battlefield, you will see victories without lifting a hand. You will see people removed, plots exposed, traps dismantled, not by your cleverness, but by God's precision. The most powerful move you can make in a battle is to step aside and let God have full command. Let God take over your mornings. The first moments of your day determine the posture of your heart. Don't let the first thing you reach for be your phone. Let it be your focus on God. When you give God your mornings, you are not just starting your day, you are inviting divine alignment. You are declaring that no matter what news comes, no matter what pressure arises, you are anchored. And that anchoring doesn't come from motivational speeches or fleeting emotions. It comes from the steadfast presence of the one who holds the entire day in His hands. Let God take over the hidden places, the ones no one sees, the secret fears, the quiet insecurities, the private sins. You can fool others, you can even lie to yourself, but you cannot hide from God. And the beauty of surrender is that when you stop pretending, God starts healing. When you drop the mask, God begins the makeover, not from the outside in, but from the inside out. He reshapes your heart, rewrites your motives, and reawakens the purpose that pain buried. Don't fear the exposure. God does not uncover to shame, He uncovers to restore. Let God take over your parenting, your leadership, your decisions, because even in roles of influence, you are not the ultimate source. You are a vessel, a steward, a temporary carrier of something far greater than yourself. And when you try to lead without God, you will burn out. You will break under the pressure. But when you allow God to lead through you, wisdom flows, strength multiplies, patience grows. You speak less and accomplish more, not because you've become better, but because God has taken full control. Let God take over your dreams. Yes, the ones that feel delayed, impossible, or dead. Just because something hasn't happened yet doesn't mean God has forgotten. Time is not a threat to God's plan. It's a tool in His hand. You may be walking through years of waiting, but those years are not wasted. When God takes over, He does more in a moment than you could do in a lifetime. That dream buried in your heart, it's not over. It's just being refined. And when the time is right, it will rise from the ashes, stronger than before and soaked in the glory of God's fingerprint. Let God take over your habits. You cannot carry divine power and remain enslaved to destructive patterns. There are things you must release in order to rise. There are comforts you must confront and cycles you must surrender. God cannot fill what is already full of compromise. You must make room. Let Him clean out what's contaminating your spirit. Let Him remove the things you've grown attached to, the things you've called normal, but that have been slowly stealing your spiritual authority. When God takes over your habits, transformation becomes visible. You begin to glow with clarity, discipline, and fire. Let God take over your fears. Fear is a liar dressed in logic. It convinces you to stay where it's safe, to avoid the unknown, to build walls instead of faith. But fear is no match for the one who split seas and raised nations from nothing. When you let God take over, fear doesn't vanish instantly, but it loses its power. You begin to walk in boldness, not because you have no fear, but because you've given it no authority. God becomes your courage. God becomes your light, and every step you take becomes a testimony that trust in Him silences every lie of the enemy. Let God take over your time. So much is wasted on distractions, entertainment, comparison, and chasing what has no eternal value. But when God takes over your time, every moment becomes sacred. You begin to discern what matters. You stop rushing. You stop running. You start living with intention. And your time, once filled with clutter, now becomes a garden where peace, clarity, and purpose begin to grow. Time